Joyful Christian Mystic Hermit. I'm going to continue on with these messages that God gave me. And I don't know what it was. I can't remember what it was that had me understand. This was back in 1996, that a year after I had been confirmed a Catholic, that I was then in prison mode. And the prison was a metaphor for being removed from the temporal and the temporal of the church, even the temporal aspects of the church, to learn from God alone. He was calling me to himself, and it was before I knew that I had my hermit vocation for real, for an obvious way. But he had already, 10 years prior, had my grandmother come to sort of warn me, tell me that I was to learn to hibernate like a bear for protection from the world. That was Protestant speak for hermit life, or to get that idea across, to learn to live in solitude and to be more protected from the world, to understand that there were two worlds, the spiritual and the temporal, and that I would be called to the spiritual more. But I didn't get it. But if she had said hermit, I would have really balked, because that was not anything in the Protestant world. It's not a vocation. They don't recognize it. They think it's wrong. You're supposed to be out there actively, because the spiritual is so cut off for most Protestants. They don't deal in the realm of the spiritual. And my interpretation is that at the Reformation in the 1500s, they cut so many away from so much of Catholicism, of the church, to create their own offshoots, that they cut out anything that had to do with mystics and saints and spiritual life like that, the numinous of God, and stuck with the scripture, sola scriptura, Bible alone, scripture alone. And it had started in Germany when the German bishops and priests had gotten away from what Jesus had asked. And it was just a shame. It's a shame. But it happened, and now we're all living the results, and there hasn't been a unity ever since. A lot of false information about the Catholic Church out there. But within the Catholic Church, people are people, still sinners, but the theology is so twisted in the minds of Protestants, and they cut away so much of what was good, so that they are very temporal now for the most part. Now you have your exceptions. I've mentioned Roxy LaForge, a woman I met when I was very young. She was a missionary to China and the Philippines. So she visited our church when she was on furlough. And she had become a missionary, I think at age 20. She had been engaged, and her fiancé died of the flu back in the early 20th century. So she was an elderly woman when I met her. And I knew she was special, her eyes. She was very, very close to Christ. And she died. She retired back to her hometown when she was very elderly, and had a little house out near the college. It was a United Brethren college. And she'd gone into the mission field through the United Brethren Church, but had come to our Methodist church to talk. And because the Protestant churches all intermingle, but there's some competition between them. Some snootiness, depending, and them feeling that they're right over the Presbyterians, or over this one or that one, or the Presbyterians were in our town considered, felt they were pretty elite. More of the wealthy went there, the wealthy Protestants. So not all, but for the most part. But human. We're all human. We all do these kinds of things. And you have that in the Catholic parishes. I call them the hoo-hoos, the Catholic hoo-hoos, the ones with money who want to ply the priest and gift him and get them in their pocket because they are big donors, and then they want positions of power on the parish council, or to be seen with the priest more. It gives them status, and it's just human stuff, human nature, the bad side of being human. We all are human. We all at one time or another do dumb stuff. So that's the same in all the churches, Protestant or Catholic. But the theology and the traditions of the Catholic Church have been so maligned and twisted and misunderstood. And that's a shame, a real shame, because from my experience, the Catholic Church has it all. For whatever is wanted and for whatever growth, it's there. And not only is it there, but you have priests, maybe not this parish priest or this young new one, but you can always find a priest in a town or a city that has experience in the spiritual life for as far as you want to grow and as close as you want to get to God. And they are willing to teach you, to be a spiritual director to you. Parish, especially a monk priest, if you can find a monastic priest or a retired one. The other, the parish priests are especially now because there's a priest shortage, very, very busy. So it's hard for them to do specific spiritual direction. But some would. If you have an interest in the spiritual life and in growing and in loving God and giving yourself totally to God, a priest would have a hard time turning you away, because they become refreshed by people like you. Because most of the parishioners remain in the temporal. And in some cases, though, it's, the priest keeps things temporal. I was in some parishes like that, where the priest didn't want to deal with get spiritual. They didn't want people getting carried away, or too much to, make more work or more discerning they would have to do, or to keep things calmed down. And so that's sad. That was pathetic. But it's there for us. We don't need the priest or anyone but God if we want to grow spiritually. It just takes us giving ourselves to God in a very deep, sincere, and loving way, and to show effort, which God reminded me of here. So I shared in the past video these couple of sort of poem letters I wrote to God about prison life, about wanting Him. The first one was, giving myself totally to Him and wanting Him so much, wanting God, loving God so much. So here was a little thing that I wrote, and He spoke back to me. So this is what was said. I wrote to God, "O my Master, if it would please you, could I be a model prisoner?" I was very interested in being a good prisoner in my spiritual life. And I was in this prison mode where I understood the prison that God had me in was a metaphor for God, being in God. So I wrote this to God, but I don't know how, so would you please teach me? I just wrote this out. Came from my heart, and I had my little laptop. I was on our little screen porch. It was June 29th, And I wrote at the bottom just a little poem prayer request, not thinking much would follow. But praises Jesus lives. I found out, wow, a lot happened after I wrote this letter to God. So it was, "Oh, my master, if it would please you, could I be a model prisoner? But I don't know how, so would you please teach me?" I already knew God had asked me. And I had asked God also, given myself to God deeply. Would He show me? Would He, God had wanted me in His prison, in His heart. And He at one point told me, that I was in the prison of His sacred heart. So could I be a model prisoner, but I don't know how. So would you please teach me? I was asking God this. Last night, my godmother shared ideas with me. This was the godmother, the nun at the convent, the sister at the convent, and we had talked on the phone one evening. She shared ideas with me like a model prisoner would be humble, accepting, repentant, and willing to obey. The parole board and warden in a prison, I was using the prison metaphor, would be looking for a prisoner with a good attitude, one who would shine in the darkness. Dear Master of my life, I am so ashamed of my reactions to the little crosses you gave, how I wanted to run away. But you gave me the strength through others who love me to endure and learn from my ignorance and inexperience. So I continue talking with God as I'm typing away back in June 29th, 1996. So, and now you give me a tremendous desire to please you in prison, to make the very best of where you place me. I need you to teach me how to listen to and obey your commands, how to clothe myself in prison garb of virtuous deeds. Will you give me a prison ministry? For this I humbly yet eagerly pray. Will you allow me to spread you like creamy peanut butter in here? I don't know why that image came to me, but I wanted to be like spread smoothly. I wanted God to spread me in this prison, in the metaphor, in His sacred heart, where I was being kept in this prison, this metaphor for God. Master of this mysterious place. And I did feel that I was in a different world. I was no longer in the temporal much, but yet I wasn't quite where I knew I was. All I could do was think this is like prison, sort of. But it was a holy experience. It was a cell, a dwelling place. And I realized, well, I'm not like the parishioners, even though that priest says, "Oh, they're filled with mystics here. You'll be right at home." Well, after 9 months, I wasn't. Oh, here we go. I was very zealous. I was very intent. I knew the scriptures. I read the Bible a lot. That thanks to some of my Protestant upbringing. And as an adult, with my children, I read the Bible, started reading the Bible a lot. After the divorce and everything, I did. In fact, just the other day, I had it come to me. God said, read 54. I knew it meant Isaiah 54, so I have yet to reread that. That was a standby book of the Bible for me after my divorce, or as my husband had left. And during the divorce period, Isaiah 54. It says in there, my maker is my husband. It gets very, very spiritual and links us with God in a very deep way, a matrimonial way, a spousal way. So I'm going to, tonight yet, I want to read Isaiah 54 again. Renew it in me, that scripture. But, I knew that I was talking to the master of this mysterious place where I was spiritually within. I'll try hard not to presume what prison life should be for me. I await my daily bread and water. I'd totally given myself to God because I was like, what now? I'm Catholic now, and I was having more and more growth experiences, spiritual ones, and I had met this old priest, so I had him to talk to. Thanks be to God. But I had learned all the temporal aspects, and God was bringing me into the spiritual. And to do so, he put me in a prison, a cell. He put me into himself. And he tells me where I am at one point in here. So I'll keep reading. So here's him talking now. I had written that to him. What's going on? And please help me. And admitting things, that I was ashamed of all my reactions to the little crosses he'd given me. As a Catholic even. The little crosses, some of the little disappointments of realizing, well, they're still as temporal as me, as human and as sinful as me. At first I expected, I've died and gone to heaven with the Catholic Church, and it's just perfect, and everybody's going to be very spiritual. No, it's a whole spectrum of human beings, of where they are spiritual, where it's human. So, this is what God said back. My dear little butterfly, more like a moth you are, dressed in your silly gray and white. Your playfulness doth amuse me. See, I had sewn this jumper that had the little thin gray and white ticking, like mattress ticking fabric, gray and white stripe. And I had done that to sort of go along with this prison theme that I knew God had told me, that I would be in prison with him. So, okay, I get into things like that, I bring the temporal in on it and have fun with it. So he did say that he was, pleased with my playfulness. It amused God what I did. But, he says, of course, you wish to be my model prisoner. This is no surprise, as I placed at birth within your infant heart a willingness to please. I've always liked to please. I liked pleasing my parents and pleasing teachers at school. So, and even pleasing my sister, both my sisters, but especially the one that was next older. Well, and the oldest one too, until she ended up getting married and stuff and went off. But so God's telling me he had placed this desire in me. He says here, at birth, I placed within your infant heart a willingness to please, because he said it didn't surprise him that I wanted to be a model prisoner. Oh, I always wanted to be a good student. I wanted to be good at this and that. I wanted to be good at suffering, even. I've wanted to be good at suffering. And I'd mentioned over here in this other one I was writing to him that I hadn't handled my crosses well. Because I was wanting to please God. And I would complain about the pain. So God continues, listen to those, and this is for any of us who have this disposition and want to please God. Listen to those who can teach you from earth. Your godmother, that was this nun, she was lovely and taught me so much. But there came the time that I had to part ways with her. And she passed away, and I feel bad. So I'm looking forward to seeing her again on the other side. Or even if she wants to come to me now. I felt bad that I said we need to be friends of prayer, sisters of prayer with each other, because she'd gotten into things I wasn't into. I'm not a dissenter type, and I didn't appreciate it that she had thought she had groomed me, that I would follow her right in to this dissenting group. No, I wasn't going to. So, and I can also learn, God said, from my beloved sons, my priests, but he qualified, God said, all those whom you trust and love. We can't always just trust every priest. Sad, we have to learn that. There's some who make mistakes. They're human too. We have to discern. God said, listen to my spirit in its many forms and nuances as I come to you in ways of increasing subtlety. Now, what God is saying here to me is really for everyone. He tells us the way of the spiritual life and how it will flow. He says here, listen to those who can teach you from earth. So in each of you there are people in the church who will teach you. My beloved, it said my godmother, so a religious sister can. Holy friends. It says here, my beloved sons, my priests, but a dash. All those whom you trust and love. You've got to be able to trust them, so discern. Listen to my spirit in its many forms and nuances as I come to you in ways of increasing subtlety. The more you go on in the spiritual life, the more subtle it will become. And God says, and this to train your ear to hear, your heart to act. Listen to me when I tell you to stop, when I tell you to go, when I tell you to cry, and when I tell you to sing praises to me. We've got to be that in tune with God that we do what he tells us to do when he tells us and what he tells us to do. God continues, listen to me when I tell you to speak and when I tell you to be silent. I haven't done that this morning. I would have been silent. I went too far with the silliness of the joking back and forth. I should have just said, oh, that's so funny. Ha ha ha. You really got me. And then stopped, been silent. And God says here, and you know well enough which is the more difficult for you. My loud moth, he called me. It's talking. And you did catch my playful word treatment. Yes, I did, Lord. And I've caught it again right now. Many years later, rereading this. So God continued on. A model prisoner, child, is one who does my will, always. And this is not easy for my children who live in the world. You do good deeds, but flutter blindly ahead. See, I've told you how I'm so scattered. For all these years I've been scattered. I should have been reading this every single day, but I scattered. I help you now by making you my prisoner. Yes, now you get the picture. In my prison, you are beautifully chained to my will, for I train you to submit, to follow, to speak when spoken to, and to obey my commands. In my prison, you are taught to appreciate each present moment and what it contains. You learn to accept whatever is given you. Hardships, loneliness. I hope Michelle's listening because this is for her too. It's for all of us. This is good. If you want to spiritually progress, and I do, so I have to start over and start at another level maybe, but back to prison life. God's holy prison, his heart. So you have to learn to accept whatever is given you. Hardships, loneliness, deprivations, pain, embarrassment, and the truth about who you are, as humiliating as that may be. Furthermore, you are taught to let go, as you call it, and you did ask me to teach you how to let go, did you not? I had back then. I remember I used to pray a lot. Oh, help me to let go. Help me to let go. And even now you are having to let go of doubts as you wonder if this is truly me speaking to you, since it seems so easy. And you say, I'm not even in an altered state. And I had wondered. And when I started rereading this afternoon, I thought, I was trying to remember back, what was I doing when I was doing this? Is this something, did I make this up? No, I remembered where I was then, exactly where I was. On our screen porch, on a chase lounge that had an automatic bend in the legs, so I didn't have to bend up my knees on mine. I could really and I had my laptop. And I had been writing that poem, prayer to God, writing it out, and he started speaking through me, and it just went, my fingers, I started writing. I don't know, maybe they call it automatic writing or something. But I was just typing and doing what I was hearing within me. I was typing it out, and that's what this is here. And he even said, and you say, which I was in my mind saying, I'm not even in an altered state. So how could this be happening? But that is another lesson you will learn quite well in prison. I don't have to be phenomenal either. I can come to you as easy as 1, 2, 3. Just believe and rejoice. Don't be concerned with being a model prisoner. You are my sweet child, who pleases me even when you despair that you've messed up for God, as you say. I used to say that, I've messed up for God. And as I'm reading this now, I'm reading it for each and any person who's listening to this video. This is also for you. God would say the very same things to you after you've given yourself totally over to him. He would want you in his prison, his holy embrace, his sacred heart, where he will teach us. And then if you scatter like I did and you come back to it, then I want to learn all these again. I'm going to have to read it. I knew I was living in the present moment. There are bits and pieces of it. I learned and I remembered. But I've stopped growing at other levels. I got all distracted, and that's why in June, when I nearly died, I should have died. I should have been dead with a couple of 2 or 3 hours. Those doctors were messing with me. No IVs of any antibiotics in me. I had septic shock and didn't know it, and they didn't know it. They thought I was an overdose case. So they Narcaned me 2 times, which is violent on the body to be Narcaned 1 time. You go into seizures, terrible seizures. And it felt like, while I was conscious, which wasn't long, maybe just 30 seconds, enough for me to tell them, no, I'm legit. Call my pain doctor. I have arachnoiditis. I'm not overdosed. They wouldn't believe me. Narcan me before I wasn't alert to when I was in the seizures. Thanks be to God. He protected me from experiencing that consciously. But my body was a mess for a while. It was in so much pain. And then they did it again and more seizures. Even that should have, maybe that is what made my thoracic spine so much worse. I don't know. But, or my neck. It's highly likely because my neighbor man across the streets, he's retiring in a few months. He's been an RN, registered nurse. He works at the VA, and he says, oh yes, you would have had seizures because the Lord told me later, because I wondered, why am I so painful? My whole body. And the word seizure came. And I asked him, I said, if you're Narcan, do you have seizures? Oh, yes. And he says, I don't even like to be around. I don't want to have to see the patient when they have the Narcan because they have the worst seizures. It's terrible. It's horrific. So I should be dead. That should have killed me. Plus having septic shock and no antibiotics. And they were ready to send me home after the second Narcan. And I tried to say, but I went unconscious again. And this angel beside me was always interpreting what was going on. So God was taking care of me. And when I got through all that and realized, what I had and the whole thing, and I was in ICU and I had that wonderful vision, I've now put the shrine over on my altar where I can see it better myself. I used to have it back here, but have it over there on my altar. But that coin I made for me of Psalm 42. But I knew that I had strayed and God wanted me back on the path, spiritual life. And if I don't do any more renovating, fine. But I'll do little bits to keep active. But my main function now is going to be the spiritual life. Not just the videos, but for me too. For my soul. Because God kept me here for a reason. I should be dead. So, this is all for you. So he goes on to say, and this he means it. I'll repeat this. Don't be concerned with being a model prisoner. You are my sweet child who pleases me even when you despair that you've messed up for God, as you say. Rejoice. It is I who gave you that despair. It is I who love you. I'm thinking of Sheila, this lady that I talked to who was on the Visa card call line. And she says how she feels she isn't worthy. God is letting her feel that. She's to rejoice. It is I, he says, who love you. But it is I who must train you. Now, and yes, the training is accelerated to suit my little butterfly's wings, which tend to flutter quickly and uncontrolled without my loving chains, my tender loving chains. And I am like that. I scatter. He knows. And perhaps you guys do too, or in the same situation you would. Because we go through periods where our learning is slowed down, or a different type of learning. I do believe those years on the island that I had were my exile, my Patmos time of total solitude with God. I had to get used to so much solitude and being overwhelmed. I was stuck with a tear down. I'd been sold a lemon and had to use up what money I had left of my parents' inheritance trying to turn it around myself. And God brought me to this pro-build place on the mainland where this wonderful man named Craig taught me everything I would need to know. And a man at Lowe's taught me plumbing. Craig would have, but Rusty already was teaching me plumbing. Lowe's in Tacoma. And then when Rusty left, another man took over, but Rusty had me to journeyman level at plumbing because I had to gut the whole house. And I met a man who happened to be Catholic, an elderly man. I was elderly myself, but he was maybe 20 years older than me. I was in my late 60s and he was in his mid 80s. And he had a son who was like 50. And he was an electrician and worked on his own. And he said, call him. And his dad, I guess, already told him about me. And this man named Mark, he was intrigued by this old lady, me, redoing her house by herself, not knowing how to do it, just learning things. And he came over, and it was extra driving, and to get on the ferry cost him more. I paid his ferry, and he saw the mess I was in, and he gave me a very reasonable hourly rate. And he was slow. He's a very heavy man. He was slow because of that, and he was a fallen away Catholic, but a heart of God. And I loved him dearly, but he got upset with me after I moved over something and just got angry. So he didn't want to talk to me anymore. I still consider him a dear friend. I have his phone number. I keep getting tempted to try to call him, see if he's gotten over it. I know what happened. I had called him about an electrical problem where I was staying with a friend, and he told me what to do, and I guess I must have said I would call back, or he said call me back, but I didn't. I got involved with the people I was staying with. And so he called the next day and was very angry because I hadn't called back right away. And said, not going to talk to you ever again. He got really angry. And that was the devil involved in that. Because, I wasn't even thinking right, which I do a lot with my pain. So, and I was very involved trying to help get that wiring fixed. And then they decided they didn't want to. They got worried that I didn't know what I was doing, which I did. It was a very simple fix. Very simple. But, and they lived in Orange County. The electrician prices were out the roof, but they could afford it. I realized later they could afford it, just needed to bug off. That's how I get scattered, trying to help people and stuff. And when they don't want, and then I push, or I think, try to talk them into it. Because, see, I'm always so tired. I've been so strapped for years and years. So the only time I wasn't so much was after my mother passed. But then I lost money because I had to sell that house, that little nice house that was all finished, and I could have stayed in there comfortably. But it didn't. God had this crazy neighbor next door, so the police had me leave. She was her adults, and I would have been killed there. I would have been killed there too, because she was mentally ill and evil, an evil husband, and a really creepy adult son. So a place that you've got to get out, you've got to leave. Your life's endangered, and we won't be able to be there fast enough to help you when you're going to need it. So, and they couldn't arrest her. They could have a couple of times, but that would be a different deputy who wouldn't look at the file and see the protective order. So, and ultimately, arresting people like that, they weren't going to be put away in prison for breaking my protective order. They would have just been out and all the more enraged. I realized the only solution was for me to leave. So I ended up on this island off of Seattle and ended up in quite a situation, but that taught me a lot. Talk about, being in prison metaphorically. It was like being on Alcatraz in a way for me. And it wasn't a friendly island. People stayed to themselves. And this is weird. I met one woman, at first, one neighbor. I introduced myself and all. And I thought she seemed friendly, a little bit different, but friendly. And then from then on, no one would speak to me or even wave to me until like 4 years. I was there 5.5 years. 4 years later, some people who came from elsewhere to my little produce table at the front. I started growing vegetables and things, and they were the earth there, and I bought this special stuffed tagro from Tacoma. Sewage. They took human waste and made it into this marvelous fertilizer. I could get a whole load in my pickup truck for $10. And everything grew so well there. I had this beautiful big garden, 30 by 90 foot, and then a huge, it must have been another 40 feet by, or at least 30 feet long. At least, probably 40 feet by 15 deep of strawberries. And 44 blueberry bushes, so it was really a productive garden. And I just hadn't had things grow like that except there. It was great. So I would just put stuff out, and I had a little jar that said thank you if people wanted to leave a donation. And they did a little clay pot, and they did leave donations. It was wonderful. But a few people from elsewhere, when they'd see me, they'd wave and say, oh, thank you, so they would talk. Thank you for all this produce and for doing this. Because they liked it. They didn't have to go very far to get their organic stuff. And it was just very nice. And I needed the money because I went through it all just finishing that place. But in the very end, when I had my accident and flew off the stairs and miraculously survived that, Harborview Trauma Center neurosurgeon said it was a miracle. A miracle I wasn't dead, or at minimum paralyzed from the neck down. But they did total body scans, and I didn't have any broken bones at all. Now my left hand was really, they thought it was my left hand? I think so. Yeah, that they thought, the EMS guys, I could hear them telling my son on long distance that hand was definitely broken. They thought my eye was out. They thought I'd broken my neck, but no. So, and I had my eye. I have a big scar there coming down, but it just stopped at the eye. So anyway, God takes care of us, and he does. He puts us where we need to be. But see, I got involved and I learned all that construction stuff, and I promised God, though, if I get off that island, I'll just do my reading and writing. But then I see this place and the view, and it needed what I thought was just going to be very easy, but I get more involved then. I scatter. So I started taking out walls and moving walls in the kitchen and redoing things big time, gutting bathrooms down to the studs. And, so he knows me, and I'm so sorry, but he saved me again to be here in June, and he wants more of me on earth. I'm not ripe enough yet for God. I'm not ripe for the picking. So he says here, "'Tis my prison is not as you would think with your earth mind and earth experience. I set my prisoners free, but first they must grow in my ways of freedom. And yes, again, you thought correctly, my freedom. My growth might seem painful from a human perspective, But you are learning that lesson well, my dear child. Repeat. My pain is sheer joy. So I'm going to write that on a piece of paper and stick it on the fridge. I'll stick it in here. I'll stick it on some doors, the front door and the back. So when I take the dogs in and out, I'll see it. And repeat. My pain is sheer joy. And I remember back at that time I started repeating that. That's when I started to understand. But I'd already been told by Teresa of Avila in the class in 1988, that pain at other levels and dimensions is sheer joy. She had said that first from God. So we got to repeat that. And whatever pain it is, repeat it. The pain of loneliness, the pain of mental ailments, the pain of emotional ailments, the pain of kids cutting us off, the pain of blindness. I'm thinking of a man that I'm praying for a lot now. The pain of parents when a child has an abnormal blood test and has a huge lymph node in his neck, who had tests today, Aiden. Those parents and little Aiden, it'd be hard for a child to understand. My pain is sheer joy. It matters not if you are a model prisoner, he repeats that. Your desire to learn, your desire to pass all tests, your willingness to study my ways in all ways presented, your sincerity and attempts to follow my instructions to the T, as is said, all this pleases me. So these things we must be willing to do for God. We must be willing to learn. We must be willing to pass all the tests he puts out for us. That means the temporal tests that we go through, the trials. We must be willing to study his ways, God's ways, in all the ways presented. Not only in Scripture, but also in Scripture if you're not prone to reading Scripture or following Scripture. We're supposed to study them in all ways that God presents to us. Can be clues out there in the temporal world, or some person. Maybe he's using me to teach something that you haven't heard or you want a reminder of. Or uses me to sort of make you feel like this lady's obnoxious. I'm going to go get some books on this stuff because I don't like her going off the topic. Drives me nuts or something. So even that then, you'll go out and get some of the books I've mentioned, or you'll find your own. There's great books out there. Older the better at times. There's great classics. And honestly, I'm telling you this, there might be great ones of our time period, but I don't think it's better to wait. Get something that is tried and true, that the author is proven. That you're not reading something by an author that has been taken down off the narrow path. That the devil has tricked them or they've fallen. You just never know. But usually after 100 years of them being dead, a truly classic book on the spiritual life, whatever was with that person will come to light. If it's good or if it's bad. And always go with the good. Get the best you can get. Even if you have to go back to reprints of books written in the 12th century or the 11th or even the 5th century. And follow his instructions to the T. No need to compete. That's important. Because I've known of people who try to compete or who thinks it's a competition. Even the hermit lady who was so competitive with my blog, I stopped writing it. It just got to be too much. It's not a competition. Sharing our spiritual lives is no competition. We're just sharing or writing about God. It's not a competition. Or sharing what we're learning. It can be helpful to others. I'm helped. That's why I've gotten out even, I have books here of people and their experiences, mystics, so that I can learn from them. It's not to compete with them. As it says, no need to compete, for you see not your fellow inmates when we're in prison. When we're in God, we're so occupied with God and what He's teaching us, we don't have time to be looking at other people and what they're doing. Or we shouldn't. And you are free to come and go, to accept invitations for short outings, but you must not tarry long outside the prison walls. And see, that was advice for me, but it's probably good for anyone. Because the longer we get out into the temporal and, get involved with lots and lots of people, we're going to be drawn off. Unless, like Koine, he's a cooperator for the Daughters of St. Paul. So he's doing for a good cause. They're religious sisters. And their particular outreach and mission is to spread the way, the truth, and the life, Christianity, spread Christianity through books, written books. And so they sell those, they publish them, they write some write them, others they take people in who've written and will publish other writers, other authors, and then they publish and then they market them and sell them. It's quite a process. They do documentaries, and they have a documentary on YouTube of the Daughters of St. Paul, which will say what all they do. And of the Society of St. Paul. It'll explain it also. They have a documentary of, I guess it's of Father James Alberione, the founder of it. And then it will go into detail from there. It's not of the other two, it's of his life. But it's by the St. Paul media. So that would be good to watch and get ideas. If God calls you to active life, and has you in something that is very spiritual, then you have access to all the spiritual. And you're going to be surrounded by religious sisters or religious brothers if you're a volunteer cooperator for these monasteries. And then you learn that way, and you learn from them because they've had spiritual training. They've been in prison, and they are in prison. Their convents and monasteries are their essential prison on earth. So see, it's all metaphor, but it has substance to it, what God is telling us to do. So, I had my short Christmas outing to my daughters, and run my errands, and that's don't tarry long outside the prison walls. You get pulled away. You get involved in the temporal then easily. It's a temptation. But if you want to learn God, you have to stay with God for the most part. You go to your job, and most people have jobs that they can either do their work or have time to pray at their lunchtime. I know of another woman, she worked at Walmart, and she would go to her car and have her lunch or her breaks there and read there and pray there. She started to do it in the lunchroom, and a very good friend of hers resented it and kept trying to talk to her. And I said, "Oh, Astrid, no, that's too much. It's not good to read in front of people who want to talk with you." I said, "Just excuse yourself and explain to your friend, set aside a time to talk with her on the phone or invite her over to your house for dinner on the weekend or something, but tell her that you need to have your breaks and lunch period for quiet time, just to have some peace and quiet or something. Don't wave the flag, oh, I'm reading my Bible, or you can mention for my spiritual life if the person is not going to be offended or feel uh, or make it seem like you're holier than thou. Don't do that." So she handled it beautifully and started, spending her break times in her car, and grew spiritually. Used her time to advantage because she was married to a man who was very controlling, and he would not allow her to read at home or pray. But I said, "Well, learn to pray without it being verbal or mental prayer, or you don't have to look like you're praying to pray." I said, "Learn to pray by what you're doing. Have washing the dishes be your prayer." So she learned that mode of praying. It's sneaky, but for pity's sakes, you'd have somebody control like that. And what was it to him? She did all the work at home too. And sadly, but God took him. God, yes, a heart attack. And that he got COVID and a heart attack, or a heart attack and then COVID or something. Um, so she's free now. And she just recently became a widow of prayer, it's called. In the one diocese, they have a group called the Widows of Prayer, and they make they're consecrated, and if in effect God consecrates them, and they repeat. They have a vow that they agree to. They pray for the diocese, and for the priests, and for the seminarians. That's their focus. And then for whatever else they want to pray about. But they're committed to praying for those three aspects. So, it works out. And she was so good to her husband. But it was a sad situation. It was. She would call me a lot crying, but she refused to go to therapy, and she became codependent. And I had to make a distance. I said, I've told you everything I know to do, and you're not able. You don't think you're able to do it. She didn't want to go to therapy, and I even had figured out a way she could do it without him knowing. But she had her own money, but she wasn't allowed to use it. He would give her $20 from her whole week on her feet at Walmart. But I said, there's ways to work around it. And I said, a sin of omission it would be. You wouldn't outright lie where you were. But she didn't want to. She wasn't familiar. She wasn't reared. To her, going to a counselor meant that something was really, really terribly wrong with her. And I explained it all, but anyway, this is all an aside. But these are situations of what God is trying to say here is you're free to come and go and to accept invitations for short outings, but you must not tarry long outside the prison walls. And that meant even for me, when she kept calling and calling with the same problems and crying on the phone and was scared or worried because he was so angry and afraid of what he'd do to her, and I was on this island and she was back in the Midwest, and she would not do any of my suggestions. And I had to say no more. we're going, and it followed me here even, and I said, had to say, no, please, we'll be, I use this line, we'll be friends in prayer. We'll pray for one another. And she sent me a Christmas card with Christmas letter. I'll send a letter back to her and reassure her I love her very much. I'll always be her friend, but that, I have to, I told her I have to focus on my hermit life. This is too disruptive. And I said, there's nothing more I know to tell you or how to help you. So all this time and emotion, I said, and it becomes very upsetting to me because I worry about you then. Sometimes I would tell her, call the police. Oh no, I couldn't do that. And these terrible things. And she says, but I love him, And that was sweet, but he was abusive. So the daughter wouldn't come to see the dad for how he treated her mother, and the son had joined the military and didn't come back on leave. So, but now she's free. But it was but I had to make that realize that was tarrying too much outside my prison walls, and it wasn't helping me any, and I wasn't helping her. I couldn't. She wouldn't try anything, even to make it better, to get some. She didn't want to do what I would say. If she had paid money to a counselor, she would have. And I explained even a way she could have come up with the money. But, she was the boss even her boss at the Walmart understood and knew what she was going through. And they could have cut 2 checks for her. One that she would hand over and the other one that she could use for a therapist. But, she didn't want to do that. Oh no, that wouldn't be right. So, and she came from a different country, and she didn't have education. She married when she was 16. He was in the military, and she met him and married him when she was very young and had never finished her education. And he had gotten this control when she was young and new to the country. And she felt she owed him then for bringing her here too. So, and her parents would be upset. When they would come to visit, they would talk to me and want me to do whatever I could do. But we get into those, but we have to have we're in the prison. We're in with God, and we must do what He says because it's for our own good. Otherwise, we are spilled out all over. For what? For nothing. There was going to be no progress there. My prayers were as effective and more so than anything I could even try to say. And the phone calls, the crying, and, it was horribly upsetting. For her, but for me too. I was helpless. So, and that wasn't a healthy situation. It wasn't a healthy friendship to be in. And she's doing great now, seems to be. So that was good. Reading her Christmas letter was very good. He says here, I desire you safe within and have much to teach you in the solitude of life inside. Yes, again, you see it right. Inside my sacred heart. See, that's the prison we're in. What a joyous, glorious, holy prison indeed. Inside His sacred heart. You are surprised? Now you are delighted. You are imprisoned in my sacred heart. That was all in bold, because he really said it with force. You are imprisoned in my sacred heart. Believe with unpretentious, simple faith. This is all. praises, I wrote. I can't respond more because it is so low-key and, well, natural. Faith and praises. Faith and praises. So, let's see if there's anything else. There's a little bit more. But this was a good one. This was, I learned, I'm going to reread this. So there's a couple more here where God spoke. Well, there's actually, let me see. Double check here. I think that was it. Other than probably what's in journals, but not a lot, I don't think. I don't know. But this was good for me to review. I hope for you all. And I'll do another video with the very last of what was told. Reminders from God. Helpful for all of us, anyone. And this is banal for some of you. Some of you are way beyond. Some of you maybe not, or some of you this is just a pleasant reminder that I'm sharing it. It's from God to whomever it makes any sense to or is helpful to. It's very helpful to me again because I feel like I am reborn every day. This is another Christmas day. I've been reborn reading this, and I'll do maybe another tomorrow of this last section, or the third and fourth section of what he had to see. Let me see the dates. This one was a month later, or not quite a month later, no, about a week later, July 5th. Then let's see when this one was. This one was July 7th. And then I don't know if I wrote more or if I wrote in my journal. I should probably try to here's one that was that year in August 17th. Let's see. But anyway, help me. Give me a good. Just gonna look at this poem and see if this was. This one was the year before. That's the one that was all is me, the sun, the rain. Remember to love the rain. That was on November 7th of 95. The all is, I have not gone away, not left you behind, not abandoned you, you poor, miserable, silly little grub. That's how Jesus started it out. And this is the one that was more meditational. That was before, but so we'll see what is for tomorrow with this from God. So this is all from God to me for now. And then I want to talk about, for people who haven't already figured out, how we can communicate with God that's at a deeper level, productive level, but still at a level that we can think about and everything. So I'll try to share that tomorrow, God willing and body able. Much love to you all. Praises and rejoice. Praises and rejoice. My pain is sheer joy. Love to you all.